welcome to SECT. I am Cierra Clark, and I am joined by a special guest today, Peter Burns from ESPN and the SEC Network. But first, make sure you visit FANDUEL.com/SECU to join today and get started with $250 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bets. Peter, thank you so much for joining me today. Lots of things are going on here in the SEC. It's rivalry week, but we're going to address the elephant in the room, which is Lane Kiffin. I have personally never seen a coaching search this wild where this many teams are after a coach. I feel like I'm watching a season of The Bachelor. But in his press conference yesterday, he made a really interesting statement where he said that the athletes on his team are from a very different generation and that they're not as worried about what their coach is doing the next season because they're also a little bit more free to leave. What are your thoughts on that statement?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting. It's also him kind of saying, hey, almost kind of telegraphing like, hey, these guys aren't as locked in as other words. And I think that's why the Lane Kiffin topic has arguably become my favorite topic to ever cover in media. And I've been doing it for 20 years, whether it's a radio show host or a TV host, because there's so many nuances and so much truths and untruths about it and how you can see both sides. And yeah, I think he is right. Student athletes and these players have been, are much more different. They can block out the noise, but that doesn't mean there's still not noise that's out there, Sierra. So, I mean, I find that to be interesting. I thought the most telling part of that whole press conference was not him not wanting to answer the questions or whatnot, but it was the questions he did answer. And one of those was when he was kind of asked, do you expect to coach the team the rest of the season? He's like, yeah, that's what I would like to do. Well, that's talking about his future. Okay. Now he said, I'm not talking about future, but that's basically saying I would like to coach. So I think ultimately that comes in the frustration that he wants to coach the rest of the season, however long Ole Miss goes, and then decide on if he stays or goes elsewhere. You can't have your cake and eat it too, or at least that's what Ole Miss is saying right now. And the other part of that answer, which I thought was interesting and nobody picked up on, is he talked about speaking at his dad's funeral, and as a kid growing up, they moved around so much. And I personalize that and try to go through what Lane's been. And that's a lot of my background is my dad and family worked in the oil and gas industry, and we moved around a ton. Okay. And I know from my personal, life, after about 4 or 5 years, I get kind of stir crazy. I'm like, why are we not moving? Like, let me get something new, a new challenge. And I think that's what Lane is, the internal battle that he's dealing with right now is going, man, I finally got it as good as I've ever have. I'm a changed man. Oxford's embraced me. I've embraced Oxford, all of this. But there's still that siren song of LSU, a huge job. Florida, something new, something exciting. Because I think the excitement of what he's done at Ole Miss doesn't motivate him like it probably did in year 1 or year 2 when he was there.
Yeah, and it's been interesting really seeing the discourse amongst the different fan bases. I was actually in Oxford the week they played Florida. I went to Florida. I live in Arkansas, so it's not too far. And there were lots of Gator fans there. And it was like, okay, well, the Florida Gators are not very good this year, but that's not why they were there to watch the team. They were there to watch Lane Kiffin. And then LSU, of course, in the mix, interested in Kiffin. But what I've seen from Ole Miss fans, it's a bit split. Some of them are like, oh, he's staying. And then some of them are like, I'm tired of this. I'm sick of this. It's kind of like what I've got from a lot of Ole Miss fans with their fatigue. It's kind of like when you're getting broken up with and you know it's going to happen, but the guy keeps dragging it out. And it's like, just do it. Just do it. I know you're slow to text me back. You're not making plans anymore. That's what I've gotten from these Ole Miss fans.
I mean, I think that's a fair aspect of it. And I had somebody tell me, I won't tell you who it was, but a while back, about a week ago, someone told me, in hindsight, Lane thinks he's doing the right thing literally, I don't think Lane knows. I think day to day he goes and he struggles with it. So let me couch it by saying that. But Lane is, kind of playing both sides. He's definitely interested and they're definitely talking to other schools, but at the same time, he's tweeting about the velvet ditch of Oxford and tweeting about, visor of Lane 2026 and he's going to be there and whatnot. Someone told me, you know what? It would have just been better off had Lane just lied and said, I'm 1000% staying. I'm not worried about the contract. I'll sign it. Like, I'm not here for the money. I'm here because we're going to win a national championship. And that would almost be easier for Ole Miss fans to deal with if he broke their heart that way than the uncertainty of it right now. And again, I still think it's in the air. I think Lane's changed his mind several times on what school he wants to be a head coach on. And that's human nature right now. It's just given us a incredible amount of drama, SECT, as you would say. But also, Ole Miss is going to be coming out of this looking pretty incredibly good one way or another. Either they got Lane back in the house and he's their guy, or they have elevated. Everybody's going to be so at a fever pitch to show that it wasn't just Lane Kiffin, that the next coach can have just that amount of success. And so I think Ole Miss, no matter what happens, I think they end up in a really, really good spot. They'll get a good head coach that wants to be a part of the foundation that they built. And think about LSU, right? LSU fans were upset when Nick Saban went to the NFL. But guess what? He had built the foundation there that led to Les Miles and Ed Ogeron winning national championships. Who's to say what Lane Kiffin did at Oxford, even if he goes somewhere else, didn't help build that foundation? And it'll be a bad relationship for a while if he ends up leaving. But if they end up having success afterwards, truly, they'll come back and say, hey, man, thanks for doing it. They did it with Saban and Baton Rouge. Maybe they'll do it for Lane and Oxford.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot more Ole Miss fans with just fire this coming week for the Egg Bowl that's coming up. A lot of them are like, I think I'm going to go to Starkville and watch this game to support our players, especially with all this hoopla that's around the team and whatnot. But rivalry week this week, I would say this is one of the most intense rivalry weeks there are because
ever in the history of the SEC, because of the expanded football playoff, the coaching changes. I mean, truly, we're having like maybe one game. And very rarely did the Egg Bowl and Iron Bowl and even now Texas and A&M have playoff implications. But you've got 6 games, including Vanderbilt and Tennessee. I mean, you got 6 games this weekend, Georgia Tech, that all have college football playoff implications. And so we've never seen a rivalry weekend like this in the SEC in the history of the conference.
Absolutely. And Texas A&M and Georgia do control their own destiny when it comes to making the SEC championship. But there are teams that probably won't make the SEC championship, but will go to the college football playoff. But for this rivalry weekend, which team do you think has the highest chance of pulling off the upset?
Let me go by process of elimination, right? I think there's very, very little chance that Mississippi State beats Ole Miss, even with everything that's going on, even the fact that it's Starkville, even though it's the fact it's the Egg Bowl, is that Mississippi State is the worst ranked rushing defense in the conference, or ranked 120th. In the last, they gave up 300 yards rushing to A&M. They gave up 300 yards rushing to Georgia. Hell, they gave up 300 yards to Ahmad Hardy himself. What does Ole Miss do really well? Run the damn ball. Okay, so I throw that out of the equation. Okay, so that's one that I take out. I take out Auburn, or I put next on that list Auburn, Alabama, because what Auburn does really well, yes, they play great defense, but it's more run-stopping defense. Well, Alabama basically is kind of, I know they did it against Eastern Illinois last week with 8 rushing touchdowns, but I'm still a firm believer that they can't run the ball. And so Auburn has a little bit more, they're more susceptible via the pass, and that's what Ty Simpson and Alabama does. So I think that is probably next up on the upset list. I think Georgia has its way with Georgia Tech. Then it's Texas and A&M. I think that's the one that has the biggest amount of potential upset. And it would be brutal for A&M for this reason. One, they got past the whole 8-4 moniker, and now they have a chance for A&M to go undefeated, punch their ticket to their first ever SEC championship game, but more importantly, get by this like big brother, little brother dynamic that's always been a part of that relationship. And if you lose that game, Texas, still can just say, hey, man, great season, but we kind of own you. So I'm probably most fascinated from the X's and O's of that game.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the Iron Bowl that's also coming up. Every time Alabama and Auburn play at Jordan Hare, it seems like something crazy always happens there, especially when it's at Auburn.
Yeah.
They were there last time. Jalen Milroe was the quarterback, and he converted a 4th and 31 touchdown in the final moments. Yep. And then Bryce Young, that game where he drove 97 yards, and that game went to 4 overtimes. So what is it about the Plains that just makes that game, just the Iron Bowl in general, that just makes it so intense, but especially when it's at Auburn?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the fact that it's that in-state rivalry, and then you kind of just be like, hey, it doesn't matter, right? Like, and I think that's why a lot of times when people say, Cierra, when you hire a head coach, they need to have the right fit. They need to understand the SEC. I think in a way for Alabama, it's good that Kalen DeBoer doesn't necessarily, I mean, he respects the history of the Iron Bowl, there's no doubt. But I don't think he sits there in the back of his mind going, ooh, that place is spooky. That place is haunted. The Grave Digger, Kick Six, all of these like unbelievable memories. I think for Kalen, the positive of that is like a lot of these guys necessarily don't know of this rivalry. And I don't really know. I respect it. We just got to win a ball game. And so I think that's the reason why Kalen being an outsider actually doesn't hurt them in this game.
Interesting. And PB, I know you grew up an LSU fan. Well, you are an LSU fan, of course. And LSU is so interesting. And I like to ask every LSU fan this. Who would you say is LSU's rival? Because they're playing Oklahoma for the rivalry week now. And it seems a little bit strange, in my opinion, because Oklahoma and LSU don't really have that history. Who would you like to play on that rivalry weekend?
I mean, honestly, I still love the fact of having, I mean, Arkansas felt always interesting because of the Battle of the Boot, but then the time that they played, not often were they both contenders, except for like maybe 2007, some great teams. Ole Miss to me is so interesting because of the, right there being right next to it. I'd probably say Ole Miss, but you'll never get that because of the Egg Bowl. So LSU's rivalry is all more so about what ultimately, who else is the contender, right? Like who else is really good? And I think that's why it was disappointing that LSU Bama did not have nearly the luster and nearly the shine that it did 10, 6, 7, 8 years ago, right? All of that juice is now with Bama, Georgia, the best rivalry in the SEC. So that's why LSU has to get this hire right. And, I think they feel confident that it will be Lane Kiffin. But when I talk to people in Florida, they feel confident it's Lane Kiffin. And what I can't wait to see, Cierra, and you guys will be talking about on the podcast, is how do the fan bases respond if they don't land Lane? What's the meltdown situation in Gainesville, in Baton Rouge, if somehow he decides to stay in Oxford or pick one of the others?
I think if he goes to LSU, Gator fans are going to lose their minds because they are set on Kiffin. Like when they were in Oxford a few weeks ago, they were like, oh, we're going to get our guy. We have the governor of Florida there. Take him back on the plane. I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys.
Well, what's funny about the Florida situation, and I brought this up, is Florida had their opportunity with Lane, and it was last year. And the LSU-Florida game, I think, was really where it turned because when Florida defeated LSU, that gave even more wind in the sails of DJ Lagway and Billy Napier. And that's when Scott Strickland, even though he had said it a couple of weeks prior that Billy was going to be there, if you go back and read the statement that Scott Strickland wrote to Gator fans, that was kind of the de facto vote of confidence. I think a lot of people looked at that and they said, oh, okay, he's definitely coming back for 2025. You go back and read that carefully worded statement. The first line is Billy Napier is the head coach of the Florida Gators. That's it. People inferred that meant he's going to be there next year or in the future. But right here, right now, that statement was true. And I think it was a very carefully worded deal. So I say that because had LSU actually beaten Florida in that game and Billy Napier and those guys lost, I think at the end of the season, they would have let go Napier. They would have gone and hired Lane, who just lost, all this great talent to the NFL. And it was kind of in a rebuilding year, but they didn't. They kept him. And all of a sudden that win also put Brian Kelly on the hot seat. And then he ultimately gets fired. And so just crazy about Rich Rodriguez turning down Alabama that led to Nick Saban doing there. The butterfly effect of, LSU losing to Florida probably ends up being like a $250 million change in contracts. And remember, the SEC championship, LSU would have gone to SEC championship had they won that game. So wild times can be on one game in the middle of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in this era of college football, I feel like the sense of urgency is very much there, and people they want to win right away. They don't want to have a coach develop a team for 4 years. They want to win right now, especially I think a lot of it has to do with the NIL stuff, and players are getting paid and people are like, okay, we're paying you like $1 million. Win some games for us.
So let me ask you this. Do you think Lane Kiffin is a no doubt 1,000%? I mean, I think it's ridiculous that he'll make more money than Kirby Smart. I'll prejudice the question by that. But do you believe you're guaranteed success if Lane gets hired at any of these spots?
See, that's the thing that I was actually just thinking recently. I'm like, yeah, you can get Lane Kiffin, but there's no guarantee that he's going to win you a national championship. When Brian Kelly went to LSU, people thought that was a slam dunk hire, and we say how that ended up. So you really just never know. And there really is not one guy you can point out and be like, he's going to win us a national championship because we're paying him so much. He has the big name. He knows how to coach. You just never really know.
And that's also what I've told people at Florida. I've told people at LSU. And it reminds me of, there's a great scene with Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, where, he's kind of the scientist, the chaos theory scientist. And he goes, scientists were so worried on whether and preoccupied on whether they could, they never thought about whether they should. Okay. And the idea, if you're going to go pay $100 million or roughly that amount of money for Lane Kiffin, yeah, like, can we do it? Can we land it? Yeah, great. Well, but the question is, should you? Like, I don't know. And I mean, again, if you told me that I could hire a John Summerall for $7 million a year or Lane Kiffin for $15 million a year, well, that's $8 million a year more that if I have an opportunity to go put into NIL, I'll take Summerall and $7 million in a roster versus, anything else. If I got Summerall plus $8 million more of what Lane Kiffin's going to get, I'd like my chances with the $8 million. And because think about the NFL, like the NFL is more about like, hey, what kind of players that you get in your free agency and how much cap space you have to rebuild your team.
Absolutely. And of course, if you guys don't know, I went to Florida, Gator fan from Florida, all those things. But I've said, if I were Lane Kiffin, I would stay in Oxford, just because if you go to LSU, if you go to Florida, the standards are so incredibly high. And that is not a dig to Ole Miss at all. But if Lane Kiffin were to go to Florida, well, they're not going to name the field after you if you win a national championship, because Steve Spurrier has that. And if you go to LSU, well, there are several different coaches that have won national titles there. So you're not going to be the big name. You're not going to be, I don't want to say worshiped, but really celebrated that much at schools like that. Because let's say if you have a losing year, like Coach O did, then everyone's like, okay, we don't want you as our coach anymore. So if Kiffin were to stay at Ole Miss and not even win a national title, but to make a run in the college football playoff, he could get a statue. They could name the field after him. Heck, a small town in Mississippi might name their town Kiffin. You have all of that in Oxford.
So, again, you're talking about this, if we're talking about chaos theory, right? What about the chaos of what happens if after a couple of different things here? What happens if after this weekend, Kiffin says, I know I needed to give you an answer. I'm not ready to give you an answer. What does Ole Miss do? Are they going to suspend him? Do they fire him? Do they give him more time? Okay, so that's one thing. What if another chaos theory of what if Texas beats A&M, which is feasible, Auburn beats Alabama, which is feasible, Ole Miss is in the SEC championship game? Do you still need an answer now? Or do you say, well, let's wait until next week now and kick it down the road? What if Lane just says, I'm staying, okay? Coaches the remaining part of the season and the playoffs, and they win a national championship, but let's say they lose in the semifinals, okay? Great season. He's there, all of it. But then the New York Giants with Jackson Dart as their quarterback says, come over to coach in the NFL. redo the wrongs or rewrite the wrongs that you had when you didn't do it the right way with the Raiders back in the day. Who's to say that he doesn't go there and then say, you know what, I'm going to go coach in the NFL somewhere. Somebody will hire me. I'll make some good money. And if it doesn't work out after 2 or 3 years, I get a boatload of buyout money. And then I can probably stay, people will still want me in college. What job will be open in 3 years right now? So Lane's got golden handcuffs. The problem is he's the kid on Christmas Day that has 19 different gifts to open. He just doesn't know which one to open and which one to play with.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy. They should start a TV show called Keeping Up with Kiffin at this point because it has just been so chaotic. PB, I want to talk about you. So we mentioned that you're an LSU fan, but I also know that you have a background in golf. You played golf at UTSA.
Yep.
So that was your sport, I assume, growing up, your main sport. And so how did you find your way in this industry into the college football world?
Yeah, I mean, it's real quick on it. Like I graduated after playing college golf in San Antonio and then got into the oil and gas industry. I was just a project manager for an oil and gas company, making pretty good money right out of school. And I would have to drive or fly offshore a lot of times. And I'd be on these long drives and I'd be sick and tired of the 5 different burned CDs that I had, in the car. So I started listening to sports talk radio. And Fox Sports Radio had a show with Andrew Siciliano of the NFL Network, or now of the Red Zone stuff. And I won a contest in 2002 to be Andrew for a day. So I'm living in San Antonio, Texas. I win this sports radio contest out of the blue. And so I fly to Los Angeles. I host a radio show for a day. And I'm like, dude, this is the greatest job ever. So I flew back from Los Angeles after hosting that show. I went to the local sports station in San Antonio and said, hey, I'll take any job you have. Like, I'll quit whatever. Like, I want to do this. And they said, well, we're not going to put you on air. You don't know what you're doing. And, nobody knows who you are. And I said, I'll take any job. So they gave me a commission-only sales job selling advertising for a sports radio station. And I was like, cool, I'll take it. So I bet on myself and started selling advertising. And after a year, they gave me a little Sunday morning radio show. And then after about a year of that, they gave me a Monday through Friday show, which ultimately led to a national show. And then started my own business in Denver, Colorado, kind of like what Pat McAfee does. I did it back in 2010, 2011, 2012. So I owned a sports media company, and an agent saw me at the Super Bowl one year and says, hey, you ever thought about doing television? I'm like, I'd love to. That's my dream. And he's like, all right, well, you can sign with me. And I signed with them. And 2 weeks later, I'm up in Bristol, Connecticut, interviewing with ESPN, interviewed with a bunch of different things. And they're like, hey, we're launching this network called the SEC Network. Do you want to do it? I was like, sure. And so they called me for the audition. And here's the funny part about it, Cierra. When they called me for the audition, they said, you're going to be auditioning to be the studio anchor. And I turned down the audition because I had never been on television. I didn't know how to read a highlight. I never read from a teleprompter. I didn't know anything. And I was so afraid of how bad I would do in that audition. I told them no originally, because I thought, hey, if I did something, maybe I could be like a radio reporter or something like that, like a small role. And I was scared, frankly, to even audition. And finally, I called the agent back and I was like, all right, I'll go, but I'm sorry. It'll be boom goes the dynamite. It'll be horrible. And I went, and 12 years later, I'm still kicking in my dream job. So it's right place at the right time.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. I actually had Alyssa Lang on the show last week, and she talked about her journey. And it seems like everyone has a different path in this industry. And so if you were to speak to someone who's trying to elevate in this sports media world, what advice would you give?
I mean, one is what really helped me is having a sales background and understanding the business of our industry. Because I mean, all the bosses, they get a million different show pitches and ideas, and I'll be great on air. They get a million of that. Because it always comes down to, well, can we make money on it? And how much is it going to cost me? So I would always reverse engineer a question that I would say, all right, if I want to pitch this show, who cares what the content is? How do I get the person saying yes to this to make it a no-brainer for them? And I would just come to every single idea I ever had was, does it get paid for? What does it look like behind the scenes? And then here's my content. And I think a lot of those thought process people, or the thought, leaders that end up making those hires are like, wait a minute, this is already paid for. these are the sponsors you're bringing in, or how you can sell it. And it doesn't really necessarily, you can pay for yourself. Sure. So that's probably the one thing that I would do. And the other thing too, is I think it's easier ever than before. Podcasts like this, right? Like more reps, like it's more, there used to be a lot of gatekeeping that it was only going to be ESPN. It was only going to be local news, and you had to work your way up. Well, now you can have a TikTok account, Instagram, like it's just create content, and water will find its level. And if people like your content, sooner or later, the ESPNs of the world are going to hire the Pat McAfees because they have so much content, and they want to get these social media influencers out. So it's probably more crowded than ever, but find your niche, do it, see what hits, and then, people will like it.
I like that you mentioned the social media thing, because I feel like that makes it a lot more accessible, because
Sure.
It's not a boss that's deciding, oh, I don't like her stuff, or that's weird. It's the general public. And if the general public likes your stuff and comments and boosts engagement, then you're golden at that point.
Yeah, because what happens now is that these major companies, ESPN included, they have as many viewers as they're going to get. They're always looking for new, not revenue streams, but new attention streams. And so, the content themselves brings people in, but now can I get someone who has a large social media following? Can those people come in and bring new listeners or new viewers to the table, or new sponsors? So it's a fascinating time in our industry, and it's a great time for anybody trying to get into it. And again, the one thing I kick myself at, and I probably wouldn't do it again differently, was I always owned my own content. When I owned my own business, that was the best thing to do. Nobody could tell me no. If I wanted to interview this person, I could do it. If I wanted to say whatever I wanted to say, I could do it. I don't necessarily can't do that when I'm working for ESPN, right? Because of different partnerships and whatnot. But that's also something that was my dream job to ever work for ESPN. So I was willing to give up that aspect of it. And they've actually been a lot better than I ever thought they would be, right? About what you can and cannot talk about. I remember first working for ESPN, and I said something about how I thought Alabama was going to go 8-4 one season. And I got pulled into an office and go, why did you say that? Was it to create controversy and get your name out there? And I go, no, it's because of this. And this is why I think they go 8-4. And they go, I don't mind what you ever say on air, as long as you can back up your thought process. Don't say something for the fact of just trending in social media. If you can give me a thought out process, I like critical thinkers. And that was a good lesson that I learned right from the jump.
Absolutely. An experience, putting yourself out there, making mistakes is just huge in this world.
No, I mean, you're doing it right now. Like, no one's going to pluck you out of anywhere in this life and say, God, we loved you. Can you do this? They don't. You got to you make your own luck. In our industry, so many people are overworked right now, where they don't have the bandwidth to go find new people or new ideas. But if you tell them, hey, I got this, let's do it. I mean, a lot of times, like how I first got on Get Up in Sports Center was I went to those people and said, put me on. I know you guys need guests, put me on. And they did. And it went well. And so I do it more often. So you got to kind of create your own luck. And then if they say no, all right, well, you didn't lose anything really. Like, go for it.
And I also love that these bigger networks are kind of bringing in these influencers or sports media TikTokers. I think a few weeks ago, you guys had Kylan Darnell on your show. It was for Sirius XM. And, she was really big with the Bama Rush. And, I see some of the, I don't want to say older, but non-social media crowd are like, who are these people that they're bringing on? But younger people will watch when they see someone that is maybe of their age demographic. I made a video recently and I kind of compared the Lane Kiffin situation to dating and relationships and all that stuff. And it got pretty big on Instagram Reels. And I even had this guy comment, which this is one of my favorite types of comments. This guy was like, hey, Cierra, I've been complaining about this Lane Kiffin stuff all week and my wife is sick of it. But then I showed her your video and now she understands why I'm so frustrated. So it's just, it's a different way of explaining things.
Different audiences. Right. And again, like you have to find a niche, you have to find a way to stand out. And I think it's easier than ever with social media, but that's my deal is it's quick when you can tell people that are fraudulent in doing stuff for the takes. And I'll be honest with you, I was one of those people early in my career, especially at ESPN, and the things that I would say to be like, oh, let me show you how edgy I could be. And people don't take you seriously. And I would like to think in my more mature days that I've said it's fine to have an outlandish take, but where's the basis of it? Does it actually make sense? And can you back it up in an argument versus, oh, that was a hot Twitter take? Like, for instance, I said something a couple weeks ago about all these job openings. And I said, frankly, I think Auburn might be the best of the 4 that were open. And people lost their mind. They're like, well, you're an LSU fan. Florida's won championships. Why Auburn? And my rationale was that, like, Auburn is all in the same direction right now, which is crazy to say about Auburn, to be honest with you. But like, there is not the chaos of a Louisiana governor getting involved. There is not the chaos of, Florida going through coaches and stuff like that, like all of the boosters, all the decision makers, all of the people that matter at Auburn are kind of all in the same boat right now. And that's why their coaching search has actually gone fairly, I think, well and under the radar right now.
Yeah. Auburn, Arkansas, LSU, Florida, so many job openings right now in the SEC.
Wow.
It's crazy.
For now, could be more.
You never know. Crazy time in this conference, but hey, FanDuel is getting you ready for the NFL season. That's going on right now, actually, with an offer you don't want to miss. New customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet $5, and if it wins, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. And you can do parlays, player props, ride the live lines, whatever your thing is. FanDuel has you covered. The only question is, are you ready to play? So visit FanDuel.com/SECU to download the FanDuel app today and get started. PB, thank you so much for joining me. And where can everyone watch you or listen to you?
No, you can yell at me on social media at Peter Burns ESPN, either on Instagram or Twitter. And again, I got too many shows. I mean, Monday through Friday on Sirius XM, obviously as the anchor for SEC Network. I do an ESPN radio show on Sunday morning. So I'm sure people are sick and tired of hearing me, but you can yell at me there. So
thank you so much, PB, and we'll see you guys next time.